Okay, we're going to try and respect everyone's time today and try to get started right on time. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Lopez, and there are a few things before we need to take care of before we get started. Um, there are a couple of housekeeping items to take care of. I'm going to share a few notes about our sponsors and how this all came together, and I'm going to introduce our speaker and then let her take it away. Afterwards, there will be some time for Q&A, so please stick around and be able to ask some of those questions that you might have. Um, First of all, some housekeeping things. I'm assuming you know where the restroom is wherever you are, but if you don't, uh, please go ahead and seek some help. No, but if you do need to take a break from this call, please go ahead and should have some controls on the window that you're watching the call in. You can pause and even rewind if you want to catch something again, but that is there for your use. Also, as I've mentioned, the Q&A is on the right-hand side of your screen. And all throughout the call, you can be asking some questions. However, we won't be answering those until the end, but we do have a few people monitoring those questions. So if you do have some questions you would like to ask, please put those in. They won't all necessarily be published, but we will be monitoring them. And then as they come in and we want to publish them for our speaker to be able to answer, we'll do that. There are also to help with accessibility, there's also the ability to do closed caption. So if you mouse down to the bottom of your screen, you should see the little closed caption icon. And you can even change the language if you would like, if that's more comfortable for you. I believe there should be some options for that, but it is machine translation, so please forgive any mistakes that might happen. And then finally, as far as housekeeping is concerned, we are going to be recording this, and you should get access to this call or to this recorded webinar almost immediately after the call, after the webinar. So just keep that in mind. You can watch it later or be able to share content. And we'll also be posting this in some other locations afterwards as well for future use. I'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is David Lopez. I am the Senior Alliance Manager for ScreenBeam. If you were going to mention our sponsor here, this webinar series is sponsored by ScreenBeam Wireless Display Solutions. ScreenBeam is the #1 wireless display solution for classrooms, conference rooms, and collaboration around the world. We offer a touchless solution to today's, well, too much touch environment, a safer solution for connecting, but more importantly, we offer the teacher or presenter the ability to be untethered from cables and connectors while sharing their lessons, stories, digital content, and more. If you would like more information about how to implement a truly modern classroom space, please contact us at screenbeam.com for a free trial device or consultation about reverse engineering the modern classroom or understanding the true cost of a modern classroom. Please do so. We also want to mention, of course, Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence. Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that many of you may be familiar with. They has been serving schools across the nation since 2001. They are passionate about education and want schools to be the very best for students. The Blue Ribbon School of Excellence one-of-a-kind assessment survey provides actionable insights that can be used as the starting point for school improvement, and their comprehensive approach to helping schools includes professional development and support, best practice sharing, conferences, and networking. They do everything possible to create a path forward for all schools and students. We have some exciting things to share about Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence National Conference this year. So once again, please don't miss that at the end of the session today. And now on to our speaker, Jayne. Jayne Ellspermann is a nationally recognized and award-winning school leader who is dedicated to working with schools to ensure student success. During her career in education, she served in a variety of positions, including teacher, curriculum coordinator, assistant principal, principal, and district administrator. For 25 years, she served as a school principal at the elementary, middle, and high school level and has been recognized as Florida's Arts Administrator of the Year, Florida's Literacy Leader of the Year, and Florida's Principal of the Year. In 2015, she was recognized by the National Association of Secondary School Principals as the National Principal of the Year. As principal of Westport High School, she was responsible for taking the school from being the lowest performing school in the district to the highest performing school in the district, earning a state grade of A for 5 consecutive years. In her current role as CEO and founder of Jayne Ellspermann LLC School Leadership Development, she believes her most important responsibility is to support school leaders to create a school culture where everyone can grow and student achievement soars. Her personal mission is to create opportunities for individuals to exceed their perceived potential. And personally, I've had a chance to work with Jayne over the last few days, and every once in a while you meet people, and not even face to face nowadays, but that you really know are fantastic people. And Jayne has, for me, been one of those people, and it's been great to get to know her, and I hope we continue to be able to work together. So Jayne, you can go ahead and share your screen, and I'll hand it off to you. Continue in just a second here. There we go.
Okay. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. As we get started on our time together and we're looking at leading from a distance, one of the first things that I think about as I think about all of us that are working in schools is it's as if it's our first year being a principal, our first year being a teacher, because everything this year is changed. It's different. But one of the things that I feel very strongly about is from disruption comes opportunity. So here we have this amazing opportunity to take a look at the way that we've always done things and really set our course forward. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be taking a look at those things that are having to be done differently because we're trying to make sure that we're keeping the best interest of our students and our communities in mind. So one of the things that we have to think about when we are looking at what happened, and I go back to March of 2020. For many of us, we were on spring break and we were told we're going to get another week of spring break. But then we had another week added, and then a month added, and before we knew it, we spent the rest of the school year, so many of us, without our students. And we experienced something that happens when we have that type of disruption. We were in our comfort zone. So that blue circle that you see on the left end of your screen is where we were. We were safe, we were in control. If you were a teacher last year, if you were a principal last year, you knew what your work looked like. You knew what school meant, but then something happened. And for many of us, we went into the fear zone. We lacked self-confidence about what was going on because we really didn't know what was ahead, and every day was uncertain. But then quickly over the summer, we started getting into that learning zone. What is it that we're going to do to deal with the situation that we're at? And I do feel that as we move through this first quarter of 2021, we're really getting into that growth zone where we're looking at how are we going to work with what we have. And there have been so many people who have done so many great things that are really leading to the wealth of knowledge that we have when it comes to that work that we call school. So one of the first things that we realize is that school is not a building. For so many of us, we have associated school as that building that we went to from the time that we were young and we started going to school. We went to a building, but now that's not exactly where all the learning takes place. We know that learning can take place outside of the building, and it has for a long time, but we haven't recognized the potential that we have in what we can do with learning outside of our school. We know that we operate in this tremendous community commitment of schools are the place where children go, and that our communities have an expectation that when we have our children in school, that they're going to be better for the time they're with us. And so now we've had to make some adjustments because it's not just about the building, it's about wherever that learning is taking place. What we quickly found out is that once we left the school building, that we really had to rely on what are those other tools that we have that we can help move our schools forward, that we can help when it comes to making sure that our children are better for the time they're with us. And so for many of us, we went immediately to technology because we've been blessed with the advances that have come in educational technology. And we looked at how can we use and leverage the technology that we have in our hand. But there are so many things that came into play, and the biggest one is access. Once we began to look at technology as that vehicle to provide school, we were stung with so many different roadblocks to providing that access to our students. The first roadblock that we had with access was the devices, because many students did not have devices at home, and we scrambled to try to provide devices within our communities. And that involves so many different things. What's our inventory? What is the capacity of those devices? How are we going to check them out? What are we going to do to replace them when they need replacing? How are we going to make sure that we're getting devices to the students that need them? The second roadblock to access to school, as we now have come to find school, is what about the internet? What type of internet access do we have? And that roadblock became more complicated as we would take one roadblock and we broke it down, and we would provide hotspots, or we would take buses loaded with Wi-Fi to community centers and school parking lots so that children could access the internet. We realized that there are places in our community that it didn't matter. We could not provide internet access due to the isolation of that area, or it wasn't possible. So we had several roadblocks, but probably the one problem that we had that involved access was instruction. Once we get through that hurdle, and most of our teachers had worked with technology in some way, shape, or form, but we're now struggling with the fact that not all of our teachers have had the experience to be able to teach using technology. Teaching is a very relational business, and when we remove the physical bodies from that building, it became very, very challenging for us. So as we've been working through that process of disruption, and we're really getting into that phase where we're beginning to feel comfortable, there have been a lot of lessons that we've come to find out. We have found out that our teachers are very, very agile. They're able to move with the needs of their students. We found that our teachers are so much more accommodating because they understand the challenges that our students and our families are going with. One of the things that we've also discovered is that a piece of this technology instruction is the parents. Do our parents have the ability to be able to support their children when they are not with us learning, but they're at home learning? We also discovered that a lot of students who are very good at spending their time with technology may not have transitioned as well to learning with technology. So we've had a lot of challenges to overcome. And what do we need to do as leaders to make sure that we can continue to move our students and our schools forward? So as we take a look at this, I just, out of curiosity, we asked you to give us an idea of where you are with what you have in terms of your delivery of instruction. Are you traditional? Are you hybrid? Are you remote? Totally online? And so what we know is that we have a mix of that. What is really interesting is because this year is so new, traditional instruction has changed. We now, even if we are in the building, we do lead from a distance. There's so many things that we've put in place to make sure that our schools are safe. We have teachers and students who are their instruction is taking place both traditional and remote. And some schools have a hybrid where their students may go to school for part of the day and then they are at home part of the day. Some schools have hybrid where they alternate days or they alternate weeks. So we have all these different creative combinations of ways that we're trying to meet the needs of the students. One of the things that I have that I really am passionate about is to embrace a philosophy by a friend of mine, Sean Kane. He proposed that every school should have 3 goals this year. And those 3 goals, regardless of whether you are traditional, hybrid, or remote, are to make sure that number 1, we keep our adults healthy. If we do not keep our adults healthy, that means our teachers are in school, the parents of our students are healthy and able to support them. If we don't keep our adults healthy, the support that we have in order to move our schools forward is going to become disrupted yet again. So number 1, we have to do everything in our power to keep our adults healthy. The second goal is to keep our students safe. And this is more than just keeping our students healthy. Keeping our students safe means that we have to make sure that we can provide all of those protections, all of those supports that we have for students, whether they are physically with us or if they are at home. One of the things that we have discovered in the last few months is that for some of our students, the safest place that they have is they're at school with us. So if our students are not with us, what can we do to keep them healthy and safe? Are we going to make sure that they are getting their meals? If they have medical needs, there are so many things that we take care of for our students. One of the things that I immediately thought about as soon as I found out that we were not going to be returning to school was, what about the students who we provide meals for? We have students who don't only just have lunch and breakfast there at school, but so many of our students, they rely on us providing backpacks with meals, and that will keep them fed and their siblings fed over the weekend. So what were we going to do to make sure that we are keeping our students safe, that we're keeping them fed, and most importantly, we're keeping their learning moving forward? And the third goal is to keep our school open. Last year, when all of our schools closed, it was really hard on our communities, it was hard on our families, and it was hard on our students and our staff. And so if we can keep these 3 goals in mind in everything that we do, when we make our decisions, are we doing everything we can to keep our adults healthy, keep our students safe, and to keep our school open? Because those 3 things are what's going to continue moving us ahead. When we take a look at once we get past these 3 goals, we really have to begin to take a look at what does leadership look like. So if you are a school leader or if you are a classroom leader, there are things that we are really trying to make sure that we keep focused on. Number 1, how do we hold school while minimizing the risk of exposure and potential spread of COVID-19? That goes along with those 3 goals. But as we think about that, what does that look like in our schools? So when it comes to using the restrooms, what are we doing to ensure that our restrooms are clean and safe? Because we need our restrooms so that students can wash their hands. We need them for all of the other reasons we need restrooms, but what are we doing to make sure that we're keeping those safe. And what we are seeing now is tremendous support with custodial changes in custodial schedules that will allow them to be able to make rounds to make sure that the door handles are clean, that the restrooms are clean, and that we're keeping those things clean and safe. What are we doing with our buses? Because in many places, buses are the only way that students have come to school, and we've had to reduce the number of children that are on each bus in order to provide that social distancing. So how we bring our children to school has been disrupted as well. And there are some great things that are going on in terms of buses and routes and the cleaning of the buses between every round. But all of these things take a change in the things that we think about when we think about leading schools. Our lunchrooms have changed. It's the first week of school when I went into one of the schools that I'm working at, and I saw all of the students facing in one direction, and I know that was done so that I know the decision is right, because we need to make sure that we are controlling the direction of our students and keeping tabs on everything. But our lunchrooms have changed. For those students who are eating in the lunchroom, they're eating two to a table that normally would have had 12 students sitting there. So the look and the feel of our schools is changing. Our classrooms are so different. We see classrooms with students' desks facing all in the same direction. We had done such a good job over the last few years of creating collaboration and seating our students so that they could talk to one another. And now we have to make sure that we are socially spaced apart and that our students are kept safe. Many classrooms have plastic, what I'm trying to think of the word, they have plastic shields, almost like windshields for each of the desks so that the students are kept safe. So our classrooms are looking different. Our hallways are looking different. We have one-way traffic in our hallways, and the transitions are so different. So all the things that we're doing are taking a lot of different types of leadership than we've ever had before. So let's take a look at what we think about when we look at the leadership that we have in our schools. One of the other things we want to do is we want to make sure that our parents know that schools are safe. This takes a tremendous amount of communication by the leaders of our school, making sure that we're letting our parents know what it is that we're doing to keep our children safe and encourage them to come back to school. We also have to keep in mind that one of the things that's different now that we haven't had to pay attention to as school leaders is there are children who may be opting for an online version of school or an at-home model of school because they have people in their homes that may be very susceptible to becoming ill. And so we've got children who are living with grandparents who may not feel comfortable coming to school. We have children whose families work in the healthcare industry and they're concerned about their children coming to school since they are working in healthcare. So there are a whole lot of things that we've never had to deal with as school leaders before or as teachers, because we're now having to convince parents that school is safe for their children's health. And we have to also be respectful and mindful that we need to help provide that robust instruction for those students who are choosing that at-home model if that's available. So let's look at what does leadership look like, because this is where what we do every day in our schools makes a difference. So when I think about leadership, the first thing that I think about is vision and culture. And when we think about vision, that what people think about when they think about your school. If your school is an IB school, is your vision creating global leaders for tomorrow? And if it is, does your vision now fit the different service models of education? Can your vision apply to students who are learning at home as well as students who are in the building? And this is really critical for us in order to continue moving forward. The leader's vision is what guides the school and creates that positive synergy. So what are we doing? What is that vision that we're putting forth about our school being safe and that we are providing viable options for those students who may be having their education outside of the school building? The next thing that we have to think about is culture. And culture is part of the essence of school. And I know in this series that Dr. Akil Ross is going to talk about culture because this is a true passion for him, but it's a passion for all school leaders. Culture is something that unites us. And when we think about culture, we think about the way we do things. We think about the people in the building. What is it that helps our school communicate what's important to us? All of those things are part of leadership. So we've got to think about what are we doing to extend that culture into our online or our remote education settings. Right now, I have one of my grandsons. He's been sent home because there was a student at his school that had tested positive for COVID. And as a result, and this is a high school, there are 110 students that were sent home because they had come in contact with this student. And right now, the school is getting ready for homecoming. So when you have students who are some are at school and some are at home, some by their own choice and some through no fault of their own, how do we extend that culture beyond the building, beyond the school walls? And as a leader, that's something that we have to do. We have to unite our people and make sure that we include all of our students, whether they're physically in the building with us or if they are at home learning. The other thing that we have to look at is our systems and expectations, and this gets into the nuts and bolts of leadership. These are the things that we naturally do, but this year we had to take a look at it with a different lens. So when we think about our systems and expectations, we think about things like our master schedule. What does our master schedule look like? If you are a traditional school, you have that master schedule. But if you are working with a school that also offers online, what does your master schedule look like and how are you accommodating? Because the master schedule for an online class may look a little bit different than that master schedule for students that are in the building. In a high school, there are teachers that are teaching both online as well as teaching students face-to-face. So what does that look like? What does planning look like for your school? What are your expectations for parent involvement, and how can parents get involved when they are really on the outside now and we're trying to limit parent contact with the school? How do you do teacher observations? What do you do for coaching new teachers and those people that are new to our profession or new to your building? How do you hold faculty meetings? What does your professional learning community look like? One of the things that we've had to look at, and in some schools, their faculties are so large that they can't gather together. And they've not been able to gather together as a school community since March. So how do you do this? Are you using remote meeting opportunities like Microsoft Teams or Zoom? Are you keeping your people together? What are those expectations for what those systems continue to look like, because they're so important to the movement of our schools forward. The other thing that we take a look at as leaders is, how are we monitoring instruction? What does that look like? How do we support what's going on in the classroom? What does student intervention and support look like? What about academic integrity? It's so challenging now when you have students who are at home and you know that some of them are getting support. How do you look at that support? What does that look like? I know that in the schools that I'm working with now, when we began talking about the amount of support that some students had, we recognized that for the first time, many of our parents were involved in education who had never been involved before. And knowing that our students had advocates that were going to support them, that was really important. But that pendulum can swing, and we can start looking at what is the academic integrity, and are we really getting a true measure of the students? How do we communicate that? And that's become a really important part of leadership, really trying to transmit those values to our students so they understand we want to know what they know so that we can support and help them. We've learned a lot about special ed and students with 504s and English language learners, because we've been able to we've transitioned some of our meetings. It's nice to know now that you can have an annual review, or you can write an instructional education plan and do it via some type of electronic meeting platform. And those are some of the things that we want to capture and not go back, because now we know that we can meet virtually with our parents and our support groups to provide that support for special ed. Testing is probably the thing that is extremely challenging right now, and one of those obstacles that we're working through. What do we do when we're testing students who are at home? That goes back to that academic integrity. And what do we do for students who are special ed that need special supports that are testing? I know that some of the best practices that I have seen has involved special education paraprofessionals having the opportunity to work one-on-one with a student via a video platform, so that they can provide accommodations for testing. But all of these things are part of that transition where we're making from where we were in our comfort zone, and now where we're going to take all of these things that we're learning, and how can we take some of these great practices and look at these challenges as opportunities to really move education forward. We also need to take a look at how are we encouraging the engagement of staff and students. Attendance has been one of the biggest things that we've taken a look at and gone, well, how do we monitor attendance? What does that look like? Engagement of staff and students, synchronous versus asynchronous instruction. How the challenges that our teachers have gone through have come up with some amazing opportunities for us to take best practices and share them. We no longer have to rely on the teacher being just that one teacher. They can share their knowledge and their instruction with each other, and they can also support each other through asynchronous instruction. The other thing that I think that has really helped with engagement when we are not in the building is how we use our non-instructional staff. The schools that I was working with last year, when we shut down, they immediately turned their non-instructional staff into parent liaisons, and they creatively engaged people that you would have thought that they would not have had anything to do because everybody had been sent home. But these non-instructional staff members were on the phone, calling parents, being support to the parents, helping them through some of the challenges, and really have become assets. And we're not losing that particular function, because these non-instructional staff members really stepped up and showed us that we can utilize people to continue to provide support for our students and our families. And the extracurricular activities, as I mentioned, what we're doing right now, can you have chorus online? Can you, what do we do to encourage students to become involved, and can we have these things? And we found that sure we can. We can do a lot of stuff online when it's not safe for us to be in the building together. And that creativity is really changing the direction of education and making it more inclusive for a lot of our students. So the final thing is, how do we give feedback and support for our staff? And as leaders, this is a really important part of our responsibility when it comes to instruction. And what we found is that you can have a walkthrough with a student and with students and teachers in an online platform. You can provide the support of formal observations. You can have coaching cycles for and support new teachers with the different forms of education that we've had. We had to take a look at what was going to be best for our students and teachers moving forward. So these are some of the challenges that we continue to work through, but we, as leaders, we cannot be afraid. And as teachers, we need to be open to finding out what can we do to really make our walkthroughs, our observations, all of these supports. What suggestions can you offer your administrators to make sure that we're really making the most of our time when we're giving that feedback and support? So one of the things that, if I was going to give you some advice of things that I've seen that are really working well, is number one, plan for remote, but teach the students where they are. So what I mean by that is, if every day when teachers are planning their instruction, if they plan their instruction so that if the switch was flipped and they had to go home that night, would they be able to continue their instruction? And what we're finding is that when teachers do plan for remote, they have all of the tools there that they need in order to teach their students, whether they are physically there in front of them or whether we end up having to go to a remote setting. I know I'll bring up my grandson again. He's been able to continue his instruction because his teachers have their lessons in Microsoft Teams and for some teachers, and in Google Classroom for other teachers. So they're using those platforms. They planned for their instruction remotely, and so when students do have to go home, they have that instruction available. The other thing that I would say is, pick a learning management system and stick with it. One of the things that, and these are just some samples, I'm certainly not selling any of these, but and there are more, but pick a learning management system that is robust enough to really contain your instruction and allow you as a school leader to support your teachers in the work that they're doing. There are so many things that are out there. There are challenges. If your school does not have one learning management system, then you have students having to navigate and parents having to navigate through multiple different types of systems. There are tons of different communication platforms, but pick one that, as a parent, that you would be able to, you would communicate, or have a primary communication platform so that as students and parents go to look for information, that they can go one place and they'd be able to find the information that they need. And there are a plethora of all different types of technology. And when you see all of this, and so many of these things have been used by teachers in the past before we had to go remote, and these are all great, but just look at them all. Look at them all. Every single one of them has a benefit, but this is a lot. And what we did in the spring to many of our parents is we took them down this road. teachers said, just log into Zapplezook, scroll down to the Zork app, and have the kids work through the assignments sent through Krazelzan, or check the links posted in DoubleKick. So that's what we were doing, and it became a real stress for our parents. And not only our parents, but our students. So when we look at all the resources that we have, let's just be mindful that we have to help our people be really, really good at one or two of these great tools, but let's really help our students and our teachers and our parents that are supporting our instruction by helping really teach students and how to use one or two really well, and before you move on to another one. So as we think about the past year, this has come into play even more than ever. We know that in education, relationships matter. Relationships are the glue that held us together for the last quarter of 2020, and relationships still matter. One of the things that if you don't have a relationship with students, it's hard to have engagement. It's hard to students to get them to attend, especially if they're at home and there are so many other things that are entering into their world that are conflicting with them. But when students want to be with their teacher, then you're going to see attendance score, you're going to see academics improve, all of those things, because relationships matter. But it's more than just the academic piece. We also know that relationships are those things that support the social emotional learning of our students. The relationships really helped us deliver meals to our students in remote areas of communities, brought in those instructional supplies, providing that family support, and more importantly, really fighting the isolation that comes when students are not with us in school, when we are leading those students from a distance. What are we doing to really fight that isolation? I mentioned earlier that one of the things that was important for us when we went remote at two of the schools I was working with was making sure that we had some type of student contact log. And this was a lifesaver because we were able to put this in, and we happen to use a Google Doc. You could certainly use any other form of communication, but we could all see what type of contact we were making. And sometimes our notes would include needs meals. Family had the electricity turned off. So what could we do to hook those social services that we come to count on as educators? We had to do something. So what are we doing? And now, even though we have many of our students with us in school, this student contact log is one of those strategies that we came into and that we're using as a regular basis. So many of the things that we learned over the last 6 months are going to change education forever. They're going to make us better at our craft. It is challenging, but our work has always been challenging. And if we look at this year as our first year moving forward, we're going to be able to really make a difference in education. If I could leave you with one thought before we go to our questions, I just want to leave you with this thought from Wayne Goodall. Leadership matters more in times of uncertainty. So as we take a look at the work that we're doing, the time that we're in, really understanding that leadership matters. Leadership in our schools, leadership in our districts, leaderships in our country, leadership matters. And we really want to make sure that as school leaders that we're doing everything that we can to ensure that our communities are safe and that our students are better off for the time that they are with us, whether they're in the building or not. So David, if we have any questions, I would love to entertain any questions that folks may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Jayne. That was a lot of really enlightening information. And, we'll see if some questions come in here. I did have a couple things that I was thinking of and writing down as you were going through that. The roadblocks that you mentioned early on in your talk, how have you seen, I know that the schools had to respond to those and trying to figure out those different roadblocks. How have you seen communities responding? And I know there's a lot of the scope of communities in different areas of the country and different areas of even counties are different, but how have you seen communities responding to the issues caused by the roadblocks, like access and even other things that are there?
Well, one of the things that we've seen in our communities is that we've had a lot of businesses that have really stepped up. A lot of those companies that I shared on that one overwhelming slide, they offered their products, their more advanced products. They offered them to schools and to teachers so that they would have more access. We had communities that stepped up. Companies came in and provided the internet access. So we had a lot of that. The other thing that has come up is communities have come together in pods. In the community that I live in, for those students who have chosen to have their learning at a distance and they have opted for the remote learning, there are churches that have created learning pods. So if parents have to go to work and they have chosen an online option for their students, they do have adult supervision and adult support through those learning pods at their churches. So a lot of creativity has come out because of the challenges that we faced when we were told that we may not be able to teach face-to-face or the traditional model that we're used to.
That's right. I think that's excellent responses that we have seen, and unexpected things popping up and people putting their own priorities aside, even companies putting their own priorities aside just to help. So it's been really neat to see. Another question is, if leaders, you talked about finding a united culture. I'm sure that you've witnessed situations perhaps where leaders don't try to find a united culture. How can that be detrimental if they have a plan in place, but if they don't find a united culture, how does that detrimental to the overall plan that they have, and how important is that united culture that you talk about?
Well, I think that the culture is something that we have to focus on as a leader, and I think that the biggest challenge that we have is that whereas before we were able to live in a building and you can feel the culture. We can feel the climate of the school. Climate it's not just the weather, it's how you feel when you go into some place. What is that culture telling you? And culture is a way of work. And what became disrupted was, if you take a look at culture being the way that we do things around here, those things that unite people because we've got processes and procedures in place that everybody knows and understands. Well, a lot of that was just thrown out the window when we were faced with students going home. And then when we came back, we have situations where in some schools, the students still are at home. And in some schools, we have some of our students are at school and some of our students still are at home, or they're crossing back and forth constantly. So that way of work became disruptive because what was our culture was really, a lot of it relied on being able to contain that culture in the building. But when we lost that, when we did not have the building where when people walk into a building, you know how to behave when you go to school. You know how you behave when you go to a ball game is different than how you behave when you go to church. So when we lost the building, and we couldn't go in the building, that culture began to be a little bit difficult to see. And so the challenge that leaders have had is, how do I maintain that culture? And it could be as simple as having a faculty meeting and and say and in trying to create that culture, making sure having everyone wear a hat if they're zooming in, or doing those things that create that. These are the things that unite us.
Right.
I know that I attended a faculty meeting where everybody wore silly socks. Well, you know, you don't think about silly socks when you're looking at people and all you see is their head, but the next thing you know, everybody was showing their silly socks. So it's, you know, what do we do to unite people so that they still feel a part of that place that is such an integral part of our upbringing, and it's such an important part to our country. We depend on schools. We depend on schools to create the change that we need in our community by educating children, teaching them to be responsible, and preparing them for either their next level of education or to become contributing members of our society. And we have to do everything we can to preserve what we have. And so bringing people together is an important part of making that happen.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I mean, those are the things that if you're not in that leadership position, maybe you've got people who are going to listen to this or are listening to this that, you know, maybe looking at, you know, becoming a leader in a school in a principal level or even other things. Those are great things to be able to focus on. I think that's really what you brought to attention is, you know, leadership in these times right now has really expanded its scope significantly. I think it's some of the one things that you're pointing out that all of a sudden thinking about, you know, like you said, the bathrooms, you know, and the classrooms and plexiglass and other things like that, the scope of that leadership all of a sudden, you know, shifts and maybe even, if you could use the word, expands pretty significantly. Do you see any of that? I mean, I know maybe not in the near future, but I guess it's not necessarily going to contract after all this is over. We hope this is over, you know, sooner than later, but it is going to open the eyes, I think, of folks like you who maybe are training leaders and other organizations that are doing that. That does certainly all of a sudden make you take a step back and say, wow, these are things that we, you know, have to be able to prepare for. Do you see any of that though contracting, or do you see it just changing the way we prepare?
Well, I really believe that, you know, we have eyes in the front of our heads so that we can look forward. And I really think that this has given us an opportunity to be able to take all of the experiences that we've had, all of the traditional experiences that we grew up with in education, and this very unique experience we've had to really examine what is important, what are the significant, important things that we're doing, and how can we best do them? Because some of the things that we're able to do through remote learning have expanded the opportunity for families to become involved in education. So I'm hoping that moving forward, we're going to be able to continue to take all of those good traditional things that make schools important, but we're going to expand them, not contract, but expand them to include all of those things that have helped made schools more inclusive and have given us an opportunity to really meet the needs of many students in a lot of different ways.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jayne. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and to listen to you more than anything. I'm going to take back over the slide real quick and just share a couple things before we close. Let me see if I can do that here. And there we go. And I'm going to jump in. Let's see if I can share my camera and say hello to everyone. Oops. All right, well, having a hard time with that part, but you'll still see Jayne. So that's okay. So the Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence, if you are interested, again, this was all this was made possible by ScreenBeam and Blue Ribbon Schools for Excellence. If you would like to know more information about Blue Ribbon Schools for Excellence, oops, I lost my screen there. There we go. thank you for joining us, and it's important that we keep these conversations going. And I know that Jayne's organization and Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence are ready to help do that in some of these conversations. As part of this webinar series, we want to make sure that you're aware of the exciting offer for registrants and attendees of the webinars. Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence is hosting their 21st annual conference, which normally would be in Orlando, but is being held virtually this year. About 40 schools or districts are represented by 40 different presenters, all of them sharing insights and best practices and offering an opportunity to network with like-minded professionals. After we finish this series, we'll be doing a drawing for free registration to the virtual conference, and those of you who win will be notified via email, so please stay tuned for that. I want to thank Megan Lipinzik, Allison Maxon, Christina Armstrong for their tireless support. I also want to thank Blue Ribbon Schools of Excellence and Dr. Judy Fields for bringing all of us together. And finally, thank you so much to Jayne Ellspermann for not only for her time today, but for all the work that she is doing to support schools around the country. If you'd like more information about Blue Ribbon Schools for Excellence, please go to blueribbonschools.com, or you can email Judy, Dr. Judy Warden-Fields at judy@blueribbonschools.com. If you would like more information about backwards planning the technology for a modern classroom or understanding the true cost of the modern classroom, please contact myself or Megan Lipinzik. Our emails are in the chat, hopefully for a second there, maybe we put them in there, or they're here on the screen. Or you can go to ScreenBeam.com to request a free trial and to take a look at the resources that we have available for education. That is all that I have for today, and looks like we're right on time. Judy, Jayne, sorry, thank you so much, Jayne, for your work and for your help today, and we will look forward to continuing to talk to you soon.